If you watch this video, it just might change your mind about audiophile snake oil. You know, cables, power conditioners, other stuff that people argue about in the comments. Our story doesn't start on some dusty American frontier, but in 19th century China. There's a little thing called the Transcontinental Railroad that Chinese people helped build, or Chinese people built. Well, when you're doing a bunch of manual labor, you get a little bit of inflammation, and they brought over something called snake oil. Real snake oil. And it was high in EPA, which is an anti-inflammatory. And some very enterprising Americans said, bunch of rattlesnakes out here. What if we cut off their heads and squeeze them real tight and then put it in bottles and sell it? The problem is, a rattlesnake does not work like the Chinese water snake. Sometimes they used lard. Actually, when I was growing up, my mom used to make homemade donuts from lard, and they were yummy. We're going to talk about my mom later, too. And if they didn't have enough lard or rattlesnake oil, they'd throw in a little bit of turpentine. Get up on the back of a wagon, say it's going to cure all sorts of ailments, including female hysteria, which apparently was an actual diagnosable thing back in the day. And boom! Snake oil goes from actual medicine that helps people to a tent revival with a bunch of con artists yelling at you, speaking in tongues and laying hands on bottles and giving it to you to heal you. Healed! But keep in mind, there is a reason why they were selling it, because some snake oil actually worked. I see in the comments oftentimes that it's just the placebo effect if you're listening to a cable, a power conditioner, or a reclocker and you hear a difference. Well, did you know that the placebo effect is real? If somebody thinks that something that they're taking is going to heal them, sometimes it does. Sugar pills have reduced pain, improved Parkinson's disease symptoms, and improved immune responses. Scientifically, clinically, there's stuff physiologically. One of my favorite movies is The Matrix, and there's a point in The Matrix where Cypher says, you know, I know this steak isn't real, but when I put it in my mouth and I chew, it's juicy and it's delicious. And after 9 years, well, ignorance is bliss. My mom, toughest woman I've ever met, hardest working woman I've ever met. She used me as forced labor, made me hang wallpaper and paint insides of houses and stuff when I was 10. My dad made me throw hay bales, and it kind of occurred to me that if your parents use you as forced labor as a child before adolescence, you probably turn out to be a decent human being, or at least know how to work. Anyway, she had Crohn's disease and colitis, and she didn't tell us because, well, she didn't want to bother us with her ailments. But the doctors wanted to do surgery and remove a whole bunch of her intestines. And because she's stubborn, she said, nope, I'm going to do it my way. And one of her friends was involved in one of those multi-level marketing scams. So my mom started taking a whole bunch of vitamins. And guess what? The Crohn's and the colitis went into remission. I don't know if the vitamins worked, but my mom thought they did, and they ended up working. And the irony is that one of the things that she took was fish oil, which is high in EPA, which comes from some snake oil. Cables. Nothing divides the audio fan base than cables. It's the Hatfields and McCoys, Coke and Pepsi, bleach and peanut butter. Scientifically, cables have resistance, impedance, capacitance, and if you think about a speaker, a first order crossover or something that blocks certain frequencies is a capacitor or an inductor. Now, the problem is that most people in most houses have very short cable lengths, which means the impact of capacitance and inductance on the actual sound of your system, well, it can't be measurable or measured. Does that work? I don't know. In reality, if you're hooking up a multimeter or something else, you could probably use a twist tie and it's going to be just fine. However, in my experience, there are differences, sonic differences, especially with RCAs. One day, I was trying to track down a very pesky hum in my system, and I spent hours unplugging from one outlet, plugging it into another outlet, using power conditioners, not using power conditioners, changing out phono grounding cables, all sorts of stuff. And then finally, I changed an RCA cable. Guess what? The hum went away because cables are like, well, they're antennas. They pick up noise. Speaker cables also pick up noise. And noise 100% affects how you hear the signal. Outside of that, are there differences? There could be. Let's face it. Anything that can't be measured by our current science is considered to be magic. So maybe some of this stuff can't be measured by our current science, and therefore it's magic. I don't care though. I'll take the $25 insurance. Reclockers. What is that? Well, you plug a digital thing in on one side and then a digital thing out on the other side, and it reduces jitter. Now, jitter is a real thing, and it can be measured. The problem is some reclockers are $6,000. Even $600 is pretty pricey for a reclocker. However, the SMSL PO100, I believe, is $60, and it's not even marketed as a reclocker. It takes a USB signal and translates it into other optical, coaxial, or I think I2S. Anyway, there's a processor inside, and that processor does a little bit of reclocking. And, well, the result for me is when I hook it up to my Weem Ultra, it sounds better. I can hear more details. Is it placebo? I don't know. If it is, I'm glad it is, because I only paid $60 for it and not $600 or even $6,000 for it. I've paid more for dumber things, like a steak. Power conditioners. Now we're getting deep with power conditioners. The claim is that your power is dirty, therefore it's affecting the sound. It's covering up details. The reality is, it's kind of true. Problem is, people sell like $10,000 power conditioners. Okay, I use this. This is a line EMI meter. It's not for audio. It's for, I don't know, electrical stuff. Anyways, the Tri-Field Meter EM100. Sasquatch 1000. Anyway, what you do is you take this, you plug it into an outlet, and it gives you an audible indication of how much EMI is in your, well, whatever you're plugging it into. And then there's a little readout here. So what I did is I went around in my house and plugged this thing into a bunch of different outlets. And when I plugged it in the kitchen, this thing went off the rails because apparently the refrigerator's throwing a bunch of noise back into your electrical lines. So I figured, hey, why don't I plug this into an outlet? See what it says. Plug up my power filters into an outlet because I had, or have still, an AudioQuest one that is, I think, $400, maybe more at this point. And I have a Furman. Furman is a company that caters to pro audio. So people, I don't know, bands and stuff like that. Evangelists that are at tent revivals that are hooking up their PA systems probably use a Furman power conditioner. So I plugged in the AudioQuest and plugged this in on the other side, and the EMI went down. Then I took my $60 Furman power conditioner filter, plugged it in, plugged this in, and it went down to the same level. So there was a difference. Is that difference audible? I have no idea. But a $60 power filter that's actually a really good power strip made from metal and you can screw it into things like a rack, I'll take that insurance. Problem is that those power filters are now like $100 or something. Another thing about power is I have a patron, Steve Gray. He's great. He sells records on, I don't know, wherever you sell records on, used records. You know, the one. So what he did is he ran a dedicated line from his breaker box to his listening room. He swears by it. He said it's the best. I think he paid $400. It's probably $4 million to do that now with electricians' rates. Anyway, he said it was the best $400 he ever spent. I have a tendency to believe him. And a bunch of people in the Northeast that are on super old power lines and stuff like that tell me all of the time that their stuff, when they're listening to music, sounds worse during the day than it does at night because there's industrial processes going on. A bunch of garbage flowing back through the electrical lines. So if you've had any experience with that, put it down in the comments. Oh, my favorite one. And I think even the measurement audio people, I almost said nerds, measurement nerds would agree with this. I will say nerds. We're all nerds, okay? It's fine. I'm a nerd too. Speaker isolation stands. This is the ISO acoustic. I thought these were a total gimmick when I first got them. And now it's one of those things that I didn't know I needed, and now I can't live without. I put all of my bookshelf speakers on these. I use Monoprice, they're metal stands. And with isolators, you have to talk about resonant frequency. You ever seen that bridge that was waving around? Well, that's because of resonant frequency. All the way back in the beginning of the channel, I had the ELAC debut speakers. And there would be a certain frequency in the upper mid-range that I heard vibration, bad distortion. So I couldn't figure it out. I thought the speakers were broken. It turns out that on the back of the little binding post, it was metal and it wasn't screwed down all the way. So when it hit a specific frequency, the binding post resonant frequency was terrible. And I figured it out. Actually, there's a little trick. If you think you hear some weirdness at a specific frequency, go online and use one of the free online tone generators and just slowly move it up until you hear whatever it is. And then start looking around your room, figuring out what it is. So it could be speaker stand. Put your hand on the speaker stand. If the vibration goes away, well, then that was it. However, these are actually scientific. Problem is, these are kind of expensive. I have some in my living room right now, screwed into the bottom of the Q Acoustics 3000C floor standing speakers. And it was pretty cool. They come in a kit. That kit has a whole bunch of different threaded inserts. So you screw one end into the isolating feet thing and the other end into your speaker. Sounds better. There's science behind it though, something about decoupling your speaker from something. They're expensive, but they're built really well and they do make a difference, and it's one of my favorite companies now because I use it all the time, and it's one of those things I can't live without. Snake oil. The takeaway is that basically a few bad apples spoiled the entire bunch. Most of this has truth in it, and if you want to dig deep enough, it has science behind it. Even if that science is the placebo effect. So in my opinion, give me the placebo effect, plug me into the matrix, give me that fillet, just do it at the cheapest level possible. A Furman power conditioner for $60, even though it's probably way more expensive than that. A $60 reclocker from SMSL, speaker isolation stands from ISO Acoustics, and decent $25 cables with really good shielding. Well, I'll take it. So trust your ears. Most of these things have return policies, which means you can run over to Crutchfield, buy it on Amazon, buy it, and if you don't like it, return it. But if you do like it and you do hear a difference and it is affordable within your budget, ignorance is bliss. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, which not only applies to audio, but life in general, is, "There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance." That principle is contempt prior to investigation. If you liked this video, make sure to check out my latest video about the Audiophile scam. It's called MQA. Title, remember that? I'll link it right here.
Back in that bag again. Whoa, yeah. Hey. Back in that.